gardens in America, Chicago's Botanic Garden, with 385 acres and 9 islands. Palm trees thrive in Minnesota. The trick is to keep them under glass. And a great American author was also an avid gardener. We'll tour the grounds of Harriet Beecher Stowe's home in Connecticut. It's all coming up on Great American Gardens. Hello, welcome to Great American Gardens. I'm Tricia Springer. If you're like me, you probably get a lot of great ideas when you visit public gardens. Maybe you see a flower that you've never seen before, or a unique way of landscaping. Our first garden prides itself in sparking people's imaginations. The Chicago Botanic Garden challenges people to find the creative potential in plants and themselves. Chicago, the city of big shoulders. It's the birthplace of the skyscraper and home to one of the world's largest fountains. It's also home to one of the largest and most visited gardens in the United States. The Chicago Botanic Garden attracts nearly 1 million visitors a year.
So whatever you're interested in, rock gardens, edibles, perennials, we have it here.
Showing and growing, but they grow them in unusual ways, for the Chicago Botanic Garden is known for pushing boundaries. Fruit trees trained in a medieval practice to grow flat against a wall. A color garden that doesn't hedge about using parsley as a border. And a formal English garden that overflows with American plants. It's more than a plant and flower showplace. It's a garden of ideas.
On one level, it's beautiful, but then you scratch the surface and you get a lot of depth. It's a learning garden, it's a teaching garden.
The teaching takes place on 385 creatively landscaped acres.
So you have all these different layers of learning and enjoyment throughout the garden, depending on what you're interested in. We have 9 islands surrounded by 75 acres of water. And on those 9 islands, we have 24 different display gardens.
The scope of the garden is so large it's almost impossible to see it all in one day. Having a garden with so much to offer is just what its founders wanted. In 1963, the Chicago Horticulture Society joined forces with the Cook County Forest Preserve to create a world-class garden in the Midwest. Those who visit feel like they're anywhere but Chicago. The English walled garden offers an expected British formality, but the British have their wild side too. A free-flowing jumble of American plants coexist with English garden accents.
I guess the theme would be very formal design, very informally overplanted.
In the daisy garden, purple coneflowers and rudbeckia grow in wild abandon in structured beds near an antique-style urn. While in the cottage garden, sunny red cosmos beam their fiesta colors in traditional concrete pots. Harmonizing British orderliness with a sense of American independent spirit makes this Midwestern garden unique. The attention to detail here is remarkable. Even the walls have stories to tell.
The stonemasons here didn't know quite how to do a wall as you'd seen in England. So we took them to England and showed them how walls were done there to get the same effect here.
Brick, fountains, and stone are details that lend the garden a British feel. But no English garden would be complete without a little folly.
A folly is just a fun thing. There's no deep meaning to it there. One of the fun things about the English wall garden is the window pruned into the yew hedge. I mean, who would have thought a window in a yew hedge? And yet, besides just being fun, it has design connotations in that it gives depth to the garden and lines up between the large urn on one side and the sundial where I'm standing.
Passing beneath an apple arbor, visitors find themselves in a medieval fantasy land. Here, ordinary fruit trees take on extraordinary shapes.
This area of the fruit and vegetable garden is especially fascinating for our visitors because it shows different ways of pruning plants, both the cordons here that are freestanding and also the espaliers that are up against the wall. Although this method of pruning has been done for centuries for ornamental value, nowadays it's very useful for small space gardening because it helps get higher yields in a much smaller plant.
Pruning the tree creates a lot of smaller branches, which, in addition to more sunlight, means more fruit. Sunny beds of flowers have a prominent place at the Chicago Botanic Garden, especially simple beds of annuals that appeal to beginning gardeners.
So we decided to do the circle garden, and there we show how to use annuals, but a little twist on the usual. We show them how to use annuals in different ways.
The principal area of the circle garden combines countdown navy blue petunias with shades of lantana and a surprise hedge of parsley. In one side room of the circle garden, tried and true favorites like chartreuse lysomachia and pumpkin-colored marigolds grow next to striking blue tutors, a bold color combination that some first-time gardeners may not think of. While on the other side, the same marigolds share their world with lysomachia trained into spheres. It's an unusual look easily accomplished with a wire mold.
We want to make people look and say, I could do something different with plants. Common plant, whole different use.
Looking at plants in new ways is what the Chicago Botanic Garden strives to teach its visitors. From the imaginative use of history in the fruit and vegetable garden to the parade of color in the circle garden, all reasons visitors return to the Chicago Botanic Garden again and again. When we continue, a sunken garden that blooms all year long in Minnesota, next on Great American Gardens. Welcome back to Great American Gardens. Where can you go ice fishing and see banana trees in the same day? At Como Park in St. Paul, Minnesota. The state's infamous cold weather doesn't stop people from enjoying a taste of the tropics and one of the largest Victorian conservatories in the Midwest. The Como Park Conservatory brings the outside inside. Here, Minnesotans, used to long, cold winters, can bask in dappled sunshine beneath palm fronds, or smell the sweet scent of roses kissed by morning's first light. It's a patch of paradise under glass.
The Conservatory for Minnesotans and upper Midwest folks is an oasis to get away from the winter and also to come here for all seasons.
St. Paul, Minnesota may have a reputation for tough winters, but inside the Como Park Conservatory, summer never ends. Here, more than 100 different species of palm trees cast long green shadows over visitors. Banana trees reveal they're good for more than just fruit. And roses never fade in this sunken garden. The conservatory is like a glass locket filled with living treasures. Some 400,000 people explore those treasures every year. Featuring 6 different gardens within a 45,000 square foot building, the Como Park Conservatory is considered the crown jewel of the St. Paul and Minneapolis park system. It's even showcased in the American Heritage Dictionary. There's a photo of it next to the word conservatory. This unique environment was the vision of Park Superintendent Frederick Nussbaumer in the late 1800s. He built small greenhouses around St. Paul's Como Park and filled them with exotic plants. He even heated water in a boiler and filled a pond so Midwesterners could enjoy giant Victoria water platters from the Amazon. Nussbaumer soon convinced the city of St. Paul to build a glass conservatory to display their quickly growing collection of exotic plants. In 1915, the Conservatory opened to the public. Today, people continue to enjoy sunshine streaming through the glass windows, which allows 131 varieties of palm trees to grow.
Palm trees in Minnesota are a unique thing. There is no doubt about it. You can go to your motel and see a plastic one. These are the real thing. You have to go to the southern U.S. or other parts of the world to see these palms.
Equally exotic frilly orchids provide a splash of color, while sturdy bromeliads impress visitors with their resourcefulness. Their leaf structure creates a miniature vase, allowing them to collect rainfall. While the plants in the palm dome are beautiful and intriguing, those in the next-door north garden are perhaps more useful to people. Some plants are familiar, like bright chili peppers used to spice up a meal. But the purpose of other plants may not be apparent at first glance.
I'm standing in front of the Manila hemp, which is a type of banana tree used for rope and fiber. And here we have a handbag, and we have a piece of marine cordage made of Manila hemp.
It's the leaves of the Manila hemp which create the handy fiber. Leaves are also the main attraction of this acacia tree. People don't find them useful, but giraffes do. There's only one problem: nasty thorns, but it's a problem that can be licked.
This is an acacia tree which is eaten by giraffes. Giraffes have a prehensile tongue which bends, and they use it to wrap around the foliage and pull it off the tree so they avoid these giant thorns.
While the plants within this garden are all meant to be educational, those displayed at the sunken garden serve no purpose except pleasure. Name-dropping roses such as Ingrid Bergman, George Burns, and Queen Elizabeth add a touch of glamour. While delicate baby's breath, verbena, and pink and white geraniums are just plain pretty. The maiden in the middle enjoys an ever-changing floral show where nothing is ever out of season. The Como Park Conservatory blossoms brightly year-round. It's a tropical vacation, a reminder of the bounty of plants and the perpetual promise of spring. A flower that represents justice was a favorite of the author who lived in this Connecticut home. We'll visit Harriet Beecher Stowe's garden when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tricia Springer. Connecticut is one of the 13 original colonies. Famous Americans such as Nathan Hale and Ethan Allen once made Connecticut their homes. It was also home to Harriet Beecher Stowe, who had a passion for gardening as well as writing. Surrounded by the modern city of Hartford, Connecticut, the historic neighborhood of Nook Farm preserves a Victorian charm, and the garden of famed writer Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin.
The gardens at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center are special on many levels, and the other gardens on the grounds are just a magical reflection of the Victorian interest in gardens, and it's a special place to visit any time of the year.
Bit of the unconventional. A wildflower that was Harriet Beecher Stowe's personal favorite. A dogwood tree planted by the same hands that penned in shades of red. Hundreds of plants lend a graceful formality to the 2.5-acre grounds that encircle Harriet Beecher Stowe's home. The neighborhood was filled with authors, including Mark Twain, Stowe's backyard neighbor. In addition to writing, Stowe spent many hours tending the flowers that grew in her garden. The house and garden opened to the public in 1964. Today, the garden has been restored to include many plants popular during Victorian times. At the front entry of the Stowe house, a 30-year-old birch tree and old-fashioned hydrangea replicate plantings that existed here when Harriet Beecher Stowe made this her home.
Victorians loved hydrangea, and one particular hydrangea that was very popular then is a bit different than hydrangeas that we see today.
At the rear of the house stands a very special tree.
All of the flowering shrubs and trees, the mature plantings here at the Stowe Center, are marvelous. But one of the things I'm fondest of, and one of the things that visitors find most intriguing, is this dogwood tree. Well over 100 years old, the tradition is that Harriet planted it herself when she was living here. And it's nice to think that you can be this close to something that Harriet herself planted and cared for.
Wrapping around the back and side of the house is the cottage garden. Not typical of Victorian style, the cottage garden is planted in wild abandon to represent Stowe's love of nature and gardening.
The cottage garden, which surrounds Harriet's house, is, to use her term, a jungle of petunias and wildflowers. She liked that meadow, wildflowery kind of look, and that's what we've incorporated around her house itself.
Here, annual chrysanthemums and veronica share the garden with rudbeckia, one of Stowe's favorite flowers.
One of the interesting things about Victorian gardens in general is Victorians' interest in the so-called language of flowers. They quite often planted specific flowers that showed a specific sentiment. And one of the flowers that we know Harriet was most interested in was rudbeckia, which stands for justice. And given the books that she wrote, I think that's particularly appropriate.
Though many of the plants here hold historic interest, there's one that's of modern benefit.
This plant is called Tradescantia. It was named after John Tradescant, who was gardener to Henry VIII. And it's of interest to modern gardeners because it's being studied at University of California, Berkeley, as an indicator of air pollution. It closes up when the air is polluted, and it's open today, so it looks like we are having a good air quality day in Connecticut.
The monochromatic theme of the formal color garden is a striking departure from the free-flowing cottage garden. The color garden is high Victorian style at its best.
Victorians loved deep colors, deep reds and oranges and strong colors, and they loved exotic plants.
Hibiscus in pale pink and deep sultry red. And coleus with dramatic names like Theatre Velvet and Inky Pinky paint this garden with elaborate color. Cast iron urns and terracotta pots, loved by Victorian gardeners, lend old-fashioned refinement. The gardens at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center express the author's romance with nature. Dogwood branches flow as fluidly as the words from Harriet Beecher Stowe's pen. And wildflowers have meaning from the past and for the present, making this public garden as unforgettable as the woman who nurtured it. Next, we'll make a return trip to the Chicago Botanic Garden, where America the Beautiful is a wonder in miniature, a petite version of the White House, and Hollywood when we come back. As we saw earlier, the Chicago Botanic Garden attracts garden enthusiasts from all over the world. The huge garden is too big to be seen all in one day, yet you can see the entire country in just a few minutes there. How? By seeing America in miniature. One of the garden's popular features is the Junior Railroad display, where the United States is scaled down to pint size.
And if you look at the White House, you could walk right on that White House lawn and feel like you're going to see the president. So it's the illusion in horticulture that's really the fun part of that garden.
Grass-like sedge stands in for corn in the great American Midwest, and English ivy mimics Napa Valley grapevines. From a Hollywood film set to the circus coming to town, there's a little bit of Americana throughout the Junior Railroad Garden. 11 electric trains run continuously through the exhibit, aptly named See America, a definite must-see if you make it to the Chicago Botanic Gardens. Thank you for joining us on our tour of Great American Gardens, and remember, public gardens are your gardens.